Okay, Suki-san, ready?
Yes, I was born ready.
Yeah, so last but not least, the final speaker of today's colloquium is Shungo Suzuki from Waseda University. It's all yours, Shungo.
Okay, thank you very much for the introduction, and thank you very much for everyone for joining my talk on the construct of oral fluency with regard to the gap between SLA research and language testing practice. My name is Shungo Suzuki, and I'm currently assistant research professor at Waseda University, Japan. In this talk, I'm going to show you what we L2 fluency researchers have done and what current language testing practices are. And then let's think about what kind of future studies we need to fill in the gap between research and language testing practice, okay? So let me take myself as an example of those who need to use the research findings into language testing practice. So this is an overview of the research project that I've been working for. In a nutshell, we aim to develop AI conversational agent, Intera, as a speaking test examiner, and also the automated scoring system for L2 oral skills. And this is my job. So this is the job description for me, and to develop an automated scoring system of multiple dimensions of speaking performance, of course, including fluency, in relation to the descriptors in the CFR. So when I applied for this position, I saw the findings in L2 fluency research is relatively robust, and using our knowledge of fluency as a construct, it would be relatively easy to replicate it as a valid automated scoring system. But it was not good estimation about the job. So I have struggled, but somehow enjoyed with research gap between the state of the art of L2 fluency research and actual language testing practice in the real world. So as you know, fluency has been regarded as one of the important constructs in many high-stakes tests such as IELTS, TOEFL IBT, and Pearson Test English Academic. And they have developed a lot of assessment tools like rubric and descriptors. So then let's see how L2 researchers and language testers have conceptualized oral fluency so far. So my question here is, do they really mean the same thing by the term fluency? So that's the question here. So let's begin with how L2 researchers have conceptualized the fluency in their history of the SLA. So a recent study that examined the construct of fluency was done by Tavakoli and Tavakoli Hunter. The study examined how UK-based L2 teachers understand the construct of fluency using open and closed questionnaire items. Results show that the fluency was most commonly conceptualized as a synonym to overall speaking ability, which is relative. While less frequently, some teachers follow a very narrow perspective to fluency, that is temporal aspects of speaking performance, such as speed of delivery or something like that. So this is actually how L2 researchers have defined fluency to date. So building on their in-depth analysis of questionnaire data, they propose 4 different perspectives to fluency, from very broad to very narrow, as visualized in the triangle on the left-hand side. But how about language testing? How do they conceptualize fluency? So this is a quote from their study. Let me read this around for you. As regards language benchmark documents, such as the CFR, although in principle, they encourage a narrower perspective to fluency, something's wrong. They may not provide teachers with an how operationalized. Oh, something going on?
Yeah, I think your connections.
Yeah, we lost you.
Okay, so
yeah,
let me
yeah,
just
from
stop
that
this.
slide, yes.
Oh, no,
No. Could you?
am I audible to you?
Yeah.
Okay,
Now,
so I hope the slide was stopped at the.
yeah, that's a slide.
Okay, the quote from the Tavakoli Hunter, yeah?
Yes.
Okay, so the main message from their study is we haven't yet reached a clear definition of fluency in the context of language testing. That's it, okay? So that's why I have been sort of struggling with the, the operationalization of fluency in actual testing. Okay, so traditionally, L2 researchers have followed the three-dimensional model of fluency, which was proposed by Pavel Tavakoli and Peter Skian in 2005. And this model assumes that the fluency is composed of three subconstructs, that is speed fluency, breakdown fluency, and repair fluency. Speed fluency is concerned with the speed of delivery, while breakdown fluency refers to the behaviors in the speech. And finally, repair fluency is all about the range of disfluency phenomena, such as self-correction and false starts. However, the original study was only based on one single task type, that is a picture narrative task. The robustness or generalizability of the model has been further confirmed across different speaking tasks by the study done by Judith Kormosch and myself. So the utterance fluency measures that the researchers have developed based on this three-dimensional model are relatively varied, such as articulation rate and pause frequency. So you can see such kind of measures in lots of papers. But how useful are they, especially in language testing? So this is another question that I need to address here. In order to evaluate the overall predictive power of such fluency measures in humans' fluency ratings, Judith Kormosch, Takumi Uchihara, and myself did a meta-analysis on the correlation coefficients between subjective rating of fluency, and observable temporal features. So there were a lot of fluency measures. So we actually needed to focus on 6 common fluency measures that are representative of three-dimensional model of fluency proposed by Pavel and Peter. Please note that due to limited number of studies that examine fluency in dialogic speech, we actually narrowed down our scope to fluency in monologic speech in the study. So this is a very practical reason for our methodological decision here. So here's what we found. First, composite measures such as the speech rate and mean length of run show the strongest effect sizes, obviously because composite measures can tap into multiple aspects of fluency. So they cover relatively larger aspects of fluency features. Second, speed fluency and pause frequency were also strongly related to subjective ratings of fluency, while duration aspects of breakdown fluency were only moderately associated with fluency judgments. And finally, repair fluency was weakly, but significantly associated with fluency ratings. So taken together, all of the 3 dimensions of fluency might contribute to human-based fluency judgments. So sort of good news for language testers. Notably, our ad hoc analysis showed that mid-clause pause measures, such as the frequency of pauses in the middle of clauses, were associated with fluency ratings as strongly as composite measures. So you cannot ignore where students produce pauses as well in the assessment of fluency. Yeah. So in addition, closely examining the primary studies in our meta-analysis, we descriptively summarized how much those fluency measures can explain the variance of fluency judgments together. We found that the 50 to 94% of variance can be explained by a set of utterance fluency measures. So although depending on context, the explained variance may vary, but these R-square values could be a benchmark for evaluating automated scoring systems of fluency, right? So far, we have seen that the SLA research has adopted a very narrow perspective to fluency, specifically focusing on the temporal features like speed of delivery and pause frequency, and have established that the fluency is a multidimensional construct consisting of the speed fluency, breakdown fluency, and repair fluency. Plus, the meta-analysis studies show that the existing fluency measures can explain the 51 to 94% of variance of subjective ratings of fluency in monologic speech. Yeah. However, we need to keep this in mind. Researchers admit that the dialogic fluency is theoretically different from the one in monologic speech. But only a limited number of studies have examined the fluency in dialogic speaking tasks so far. So obviously, we need more research on dialogic fluency, like how people perceive the fluency in very co-constructive or interactive speaking conditions, yeah, as Aki did in her research. So next, let's overview the current language testing practice from now on. So here is some summary of how some of the high stakes tests like IELTS, TOEFL IBT, and PTE Academic, which is Pearson Test English Academic, assess fluency, particularly in terms of their named constructs and the highest score on the scale. They named fluency, or they identify fluency relevant features under the name of fluency and coherence, delivery, or oral fluency. So as indicated by red color in the table, so these fluencies tap into not only temporal aspects of speech, as SLA researchers have examined, but also other aspects of speech, such as coherence and pronunciation. Yeah. So according to Tavakoli and Hunter's framework of fluency, fluency in these high stakes tests may be located in between narrow and broad perspectives to fluency, right? So this is one of the crucial gaps between SLA research and testing practice. They, when they mean by fluency, they looked at that slightly different construct. So this might be sort of fundamental gap between them. And here's another example of actual assessment tools, the CFR scale of fluency. Interestingly, the recent version of CFR fluency scale defines fluency from a very narrow perspective, in line with the literature of L2 fluency research that I have introduced today. The scale explicitly refers to hesitations and pauses, and the ability to continue utterances, and ease and spontaneity of speech production. And this is the exact CFR fluency scale. Sorry about the quite tiny fonts and lots of information, but I've highlighted the text for you, which refers to the temporal features of speech in red, blue, and green. Each color corresponds to speed fluency, breakdown fluency, and repair fluency. You may notice that the different aspects sort of emphasize across levels. For example, at the lower levels, the repair fluency is evident, but in the relatively higher levels, most part of the descriptor refers to the speed dimension of fluency. So you may notice the different weights of temporal features across proficiency levels. In addition to those temporal features, which have been targeted in fluency research, the CFR scale integrates non-temporal factors again, such as conceptual linguistic demands of speech. The scale may be designed to capture the dynamics between fluency and meaning aspects of speech in some way. For example, if you're talking about relatively difficult subjects, your speed fluency or your frequency of pauses can be affected by the content demands. Yeah. So the CFR scale might be sort of attempt to capture such kind of interrelationship between how speakers make speech and what they express in their speech. So, so that's why we need to take into account the non-temporal factors as well. We don't know yet whether the temporal features and such non-temporal features are inseparable. Yeah. And again, we may also need to take into account the different weights of different features across levels. The reason why I emphasize this is that as L2 fluency research methodologically relied on the linear regression models in many papers. So we might have failed to capture such developmentally dynamic aspects of fluency. For example, nonlinear developmental trajectories of fluency across proficiency levels. Okay, so far, we have reviewed the state-of-the-art of L2 fluency research and current language testing practice in some high-stakes tests and the CFR. Then, building on these insights, how much do you think we can predict fluency scores by means of the automated scoring system? In our test that I've been working on for both of speech elicitation and scoring methods are automatic, meaning that all the processes of assessment are automatic in our test. So let me show you how our test looks like here. I hope my PC is going to work well. So I'm going to play the demo for you.
Hello.
Hello,
My name is Intella. What is your name?
my name is Ken.
Ken, nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you.
How are you doing today?
I'm good. Thank you.
But you look a bit nervous, aren't you?
A little bit.
Don't worry, this is not a serious test. Just enjoy talking with me. Okay, let's begin with a few questions about your home. Please tell me about your house.
Mhm.
For example, how many rooms does it have?
My house has 5 rooms.
Now, what do you think are some good points and bad points about social media?
I think good points are that you can connect with people from all over the world easily.
What about bad points?
It is addictive and takes away so much of my time.
That makes sense. Do you think kids should be allowed to use social media? Those were very interesting points. Thank you for sharing them. What is the advantages and disadvantages of globalization?
Get to know the world, what's happening in the world.
The spread of a virus could be one of the major problems.
Fade out some of the traditional and cultural aspects.
That trip was cancelled. But I wish I could meet face-to-face with teachers and friends.
Teachers who care about their students can...
The poverty might increase. The poverty rate might increase.
Okay, this is the end of the interview. Thank you so much for the conversation. Have a wonderful day.
You do.
You too. Thank you very much.
Okay, so this is the test that I've been developed with my colleagues at Waseda University. Yes, in a nutshell, our automated scoring system is underpinned by 3 major components. The first, using natural language processing techniques, as Masaki used it in his module unit profile. My student collaborator, Yuki Matsura, and myself have developed the automated annotation system for temporal features, including speech recognition and pause location detection. We don't have yet decided the name of the software, but it will be released relatively soon, hopefully. So you will be able to analyze your speech data, temporal features of speech data relatively soon, hopefully. Second, as you can see, as you saw in the demo movie, the adaptive dialogue system in Tela is designed to achieve high relatability. In order for automated scoring to work well, it is essential to elicit sufficient amount of speech with the appropriate level of difficulties of speaking prompts or questions. Because the question is too difficult for the test takers, its system will fail to elicit or see the upper limitation of performance, which is quite important in performance-based language assessment. So to achieve this, my colleague, Damao Saiki, has developed the Intella who can adaptively change interview strategies, basically questions, with assistance of incremental proficiency assessment during the interview. So it's like real-time assessment. As we have seen in the CFR fluency scale, we need to somehow take into account the different weights of features across levels. In order to optimize such different ways of temporal features across CFR levels, we have adopted a neural network models that can explore the optimal way to predict fluency scores in a data-driven approach, not theoretically oriented approach. However, the interpretability of neural network model is quite essential issues, as long as explainable AI in many disciplines. So our latest model showed 60% of accuracy in classified levels. We definitely need to improve classification accuracy here. But as shown in the confusion matrix here, all the misclassifications are within ±1 level, even with a relatively small sample size at this moment. But again, we definitely need more research to reach the optimal level of accuracy by understanding the raters or examiners' mechanism or decision-making processes when they decide the CFR level using the CFR descriptors in assessment phase. So, okay, so here's a summary of my talk today. First, we have seen the gaps between SLA research and actual language testing practice mainly in how to define fluency. SLA research has conducted the studies following a very narrow perspective, while existing language tests tend to take a broader perspective, often integrating with other constructs, such as coherence and pronunciation. Actually, we don't know yet whether these temporal and non-temporal constructs are separable. So that's why we couldn't see whether we should go for the narrow perspective or relatively broader perspective in the language assessment, because we have to think about lots of issues such as Bushwhack effects and some other consequences of the language, the use of language tests. So, and also importantly, from the SLA research perspective, we need to better understand dialogic fluency, of course. The second point, that to achieve more varied automated scoring of fluency, future studies might need to examine the developmental patterns, fluency features across proficiency levels in order to see the dynamics of the development trajectories of fluency performance. And also the interrelationship between fluency and conceptual and linguistic demands of speech are not ignorable. And finally, the effective way to elicit test takers' speaking performance, particularly in dialogic speaking tasks, is in need, I think. Okay, so that's all from me. I'll conclude my talk with thank you to those 4 organizations, and of course for your attention during my talk. And any questions and comments are welcome in English or Japanese. Yeah, thanks very much.